Latricia Green Brown was shot in the basement of Henry Ford Hospital about 10 this morning.
And minutes after that shooting, police identified her ex-husband, Mario Green, as the suspect in that case. Security cameras caught him leaving the hospital just minutes after that shooting.
He produced a gun, handgun, and fired multiple shots, killing his ex-wife.
Detroit Police Chief Todd Bettison laid out what happened this morning at Henry Ford Hospital around 10:15 a.m. Bettison named this man, 53-year-old Mario Green of Bloomfield Hills, first as a person of interest, but now he's the prime suspect in the shocking killing of Latricia Green Brown. It set off a chaotic scene on West Grand Boulevard and a citywide manhunt.
Read the desperation in her court documents. Latricia Green filed a chilling plea with the Wayne County judge. I am asking for help before this goes too far and things are too late. She documented everything: her ex-husband breaking into her car, cutting up her clothes, following her on multiple occasions, trying to break her car windows. In her protection order application, she wrote, I have to constantly look over my shoulder to make sure this man is not following me, to hurt me like he has done in the past with physical abuse. These weren't just legal formalities or empty complaints. They were desperate cries for survival. A woman telling the courts that death was stalking her every move. She went through the system. She filed the paperwork twice. She did everything victims are told to do, and still, nothing could save her from what was coming. Her ex-husband, 53-year-old Mario Green, once promised her forever. At first, he seemed like the man she could build a life with. They spent 15 years together, 6 of them married. But love quickly turned into imprisonment. Arguments became violence. Threats became reality. And Latricia found herself trapped in a relationship that was slowly killing her spirit. Even after they divorced in 2018, Mario refused to let go. He called her workplace over 50 times. He showed up at the hospital where she worked, demanding access to her office. But what he really refused to accept was that she had escaped his control. And so the warning signs kept escalating. Latricia's coworkers noticed the fear in her voice when the phone rang. Her friends noticed the exhaustion in her eyes from constantly watching her back. She wasn't just dealing with a messy divorce. She was fighting for her life. Her court filings were breadcrumbs of truth, leading to one inevitable and devastating conclusion. On August 22nd, 2025, in Detroit, Michigan, those cries for help went unanswered. That morning, 40-year-old Latricia Green arrived at Henry Ford Hospital for another day of work, believing the basement where she worked was her sanctuary. But she wasn't safe. Her killer was already on his way. If you're into real, true crime stories, stories that dig deep into the facts and the darkness behind them, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to Crime Case Confidential. We bring you new videos every week, so there's always another case to uncover, another truth to explore. To understand the weight of this tragedy, you have to first understand who Latricia was. She wasn't just another name in the headlines. She was a daughter, a friend, a dedicated worker, and to those who knew her, she was everything. Latricia Green, known to her friends as Trish, had built her life around stability and service. For over 20 years, she walked through the doors of Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit, not as a patient, but as someone who made the place run. She worked as a scheduler in the nursing department, the kind of job that required patience, organization, and genuine care for people during their most vulnerable moments. Day after day, she helped coordinate the care that could mean the difference between life and death for patients and their families. Her coworkers remembered her as dependable. The person you could count on to show up, to do the work, to keep things moving smoothly. She wasn't flashy or dramatic. She was steady. The kind of woman who arrived early, stayed late when needed, and treated everyone with respect. To Devin Wilford, a former colleague, she was magnificent. Someone who was more than a friend. She was a mother. She was a wife. She did her job. But behind her professional composure, Latricia was carrying a burden that most people never saw. Her personal life had become a battlefield, and the war had been going on for years. She had met Mario Green when they were both younger, When love felt like possibility instead of prison. For 15 years, they built what looked like a life together. 6 of those years, they were married, sharing dreams and plans for a future that seemed within reach. But somewhere along the way, love twisted into something darker. Those who knew her best said Mario never allowed Latricia to truly leave, even after their divorce was finalized in 2018. The legal papers meant nothing to him. In his mind, she belonged to him, and no judge could change that. Even though they were no longer husband and wife, they continued living together not out of love, but because Mario made it impossible for her to escape. Her friend Shaniqua Gibson watched this slow destruction unfold. She saw the bruises that Latricia tried to hide. She heard about the physical abuse that happened behind closed doors, the kind of violence that left marks not just on her body, but on her spirit. Latricia would call off work sometimes, not because she was sick, but because she couldn't let her coworkers see what he had done to her. The mental abuse was just as devastating. Mario had a way of making her feel worthless, of convincing her that she was nothing without him. He isolated her, controlled her, made her believe that no one else would care if something happened to her. The Latricia was stronger than he wanted her to be. On her 40th birthday, in March 2025, after an argument that pushed her past her breaking point, Mario kicked her out of the house. Instead of begging to come back, she made a decision that would save her life, at least temporarily. She left him for good. For the first time in years, she was living on her own. Sometimes, she slept in her car in the Henry Ford Hospital parking lot, the place where she worked becoming her only refuge. She was trying to rebuild what he had torn down, working to heal from decades of abuse, learning to trust herself again. By July, she had managed to get an apartment. Her coworkers started to notice small changes. She seemed a little lighter, a little more herself. She was talking about plans, about things she wanted to do, places she wanted to go. For a brief moment, it looked like Latricia Green might finally get the peace she had been fighting for. But Mario Green wasn't done with her yet. Even as summer turned toward August, his stalking and threats continued to escalate, and his refusal to let her go would turn her workplace, the one place she thought she was safe, into the scene of her final moments. To understand how deadly this situation would become, you need to know who Mario Green really was. This wasn't his first time terrorizing a woman who tried to leave him. This was a pattern carved in violence, spanning over 2 decades. Back in 2001, Mario Green was convicted of aggravated stalking. 4 years of probation, but that wasn't enough to stop him. In 2006, he was back in prison, this time for arson, just over 3 years behind bars. Paroled in 2010, discharged from parole supervision in 2012 with court-ordered anger management classes that clearly didn't work.
Mario Green also has a violent past, having served 6 years in state prison following a 2006 arson conviction. He's also served 4 years on probation for aggravated stalking, and most recently in June, he just finished a 3-year probation stint for failing to pay child support. Brown, meanwhile, had sought an order of protection against Mario Green, but he had yet to be served.
But here's what makes this story even more chilling. Mario Green had done this before. Another woman came forward after Latricia's murder, and her story was a terrifying preview of what Latricia would endure. Tina McClinney was just 20 years old in 2001 when she briefly dated Mario. The moment she tried to end their relationship, he transformed into her nightmare, following her everywhere, leaving threatening notes on her car. And then came the moment that still haunts her. Mario put a gun to her head and told her if he couldn't have her, no one could. Tina froze, thinking about her young son, but she did something crucial that would save her life. She filed a police report immediately and got a protection order. The system worked for her. Mario backed off. She escaped.
That ex-girlfriend is Tina McClinney. She says her and Mario Green dated back in 2001 when she was just 20 years old. She says she wasn't brave enough to speak up back then but she is now, and she's doing it for Latricia Green. What would you want to tell her if she was sitting here today?
I'll fight for you.
Katina McKinley has found her voice and is using it to stand up for someone who lost theirs.
He followed me to a friend's house one day, and because it was a man, I guess that upset him, and that's what led to him chasing me down and making me get out of my car and putting a gun to my head because, as he said, if I wasn't gonna be with him, I wouldn't be with anybody.
Katina says she filed a police report that day and got a restraining order against Mario. He then never contacted her again.
But Katina's success would become Latricia's curse, because now Mario had learned how to be more careful, more strategic, more deadly in his approach. What Latricia didn't know was that her decision to leave would trigger something far more dangerous than anything she had faced before. The phone calls started almost immediately after she left in March. Not just to her, but to her workplace. Over 50 calls to Henry Ford Hospital, demanding to speak to her, threatening to meet employees outside, creating an atmosphere of fear for everyone who worked there. When phone calls weren't enough, he escalated to physical stalking. He would show up at the hospital unannounced, trying to force his way into her office, demanding access to her. Security cameras captured him lurking in parking lots, waiting for glimpses of her. But Mario was smart enough to stay just within the boundaries of what he thought he could get away with. When Latricia continued to resist his control, he moved to the next level. He broke into her car while it was parked at work, cut up her clothes and shoes, stole her belongings, followed her on the roads, trying to ram his vehicle into hers. These weren't random acts of violence. They were calculated psychological warfare designed to break her down, to make her feel like nowhere was safe. Hospital security knew about Mario Green. His photograph had been distributed to every security office. There was an official order banning him from the premises. Staff members had conferences about the threat he posed. Everyone knew he was dangerous, but there was a fatal flaw. In their security system, the basement where Latricia worked was considered public space. No key card required, no checkpoints, just empty hallways and blind spots where a determined killer could corner his victim. By July, the stalking had become so relentless that Latricia's coworkers could hear the terror in her voice every time the phone rang. Her friends watched her jump at shadows, constantly checking over her shoulder. The woman who had once been steady and dependable was now living in survival mode, afraid to walk to her car alone, afraid to stay in one place too long. Mario Green had turned her life into a prison without walls, and when his psychological torture wasn't enough to bring her back under his control, he made a decision that would turn Henry Ford Hospital from a place of healing into a crime scene. The system had multiple chances to stop him, but Mario Green was about to prove that some monsters are too determined to be contained by restraining orders and security protocols. By June, Latricia had reached her breaking point. The relentless stalking, the 50-plus phone calls to her workplace, the car break-ins, the ramming attempts, it was all documented. She had evidence. She had witnesses. She had everything the legal system supposedly needed to protect her. On June 13, 2025, Latricia walked into Wayne County Circuit Court with a desperate plea for help. Her protection order application laid out Mario's campaign of terror in stark detail. The judge read about the workplace stalking, the threats to her colleagues, the unauthorized attempts to enter her office, and then Judge Carla Testani denied her request. The court found that her application failed to establish specific facts and the allegations didn't meet the burden of proof. Think about that. A woman comes to court with documented evidence of stalking, workplace harassment, and threats, and the system says it's not enough. Mario Green learned something valuable that day. The courts wouldn't stop him. In fact, they had just given him a green light to escalate, and escalate he did. Over the next month, his terrorism intensified beyond anything he had done before. The car break-ins became more brazen. The following became more aggressive. On one terrifying occasion, Latricia found herself in a high-speed chase as Mario followed her from Oak Park all the way back to the city and on Woodward and the Boulevard, turning her daily commute into a life or death chase. By July 20th, Latricia was back in court, more desperate than ever. This time, her protection order application read like the final plea of a woman who knew she was running out of time. She documented how Mario had broken into my car and cut up my clothes, shoes, and stolen belongings from me, and he followed me on multiple occasions and has tried to break my car window. But it was what she wrote next that should have sent chills down the spine of everyone who read it. I have tried being cordial because I feel that the system has now let me down each time that I have tried to make reports on this man. My father was murdered, and now with this situation, I am now in mental distress, scared not knowing what to do. And then came the words that would prove prophetic. I am asking for help before this goes too far, and things are too late. This time, Judge Carla Testani listened. On July 21st, Wayne County Circuit Court granted Latricia Green a personal protection order against Mario Green. Finally, she had the legal protection she desperately needed. The court had officially deemed Mario Green a threat to his ex-wife. But here's where the system failed her in the most devastating way possible. The protection order was never served. Detroit Police Assistant Chief Charles Fitzgerald would later admit the horrible truth. Unfortunately, it was not served on her ex-husband, so it almost brings us here today.
The cries for help from Latricia Green could be seen in black and white. First, in a personal protection order sought on June 13th, when she said her ex-husband Mario Green was stalking her, that he continued to call my job and threatened to meet employees outside, and showed up to my job and tried to enter my office without my approval to get to me. The judge denied that PPO, but just over a month later, on July 20th, Latricia would seek another. This time, she said her ex-husband's behavior had escalated. Since I was denied, she said, he has now been able to break into my car and cut up my clothes, shoes, and steal belongings from me, and he followed me on multiple occasions and has tried to break my car window. I noticed him following me from Oak Park all the way back to the city and on Woodward and the Boulevard. He continued to try and turn his car into mine and block me off. He has continued to call my job and said he will not stop or stop coming after me. I have tried to be cordial, she said, because I feel that the system has now let me down each time that I have tried to make reports on this man. My father was murdered, and now with this situation, I am now in mental distress and scared, not knowing what to do. I have to constantly look over my shoulder to make sure this man is not following me to hurt me like he has done in the past with physical abuse. I am asking for help before this goes too far, she wrote, and things are too late. This time, the judge granted the PPO, deeming Mario Green to pose a threat to his ex-wife. But there was a problem, according to DPD Assistant Chief Charles Fitzgerald.
Unfortunately, it was not served on her ex-husband, so it almost brings us here today.
Under Michigan law, the burden falls entirely on the victim to ensure the protection order gets served. They have to arrange it themselves. They have to pay for it themselves, fees ranging from $26 to nearly $100, depending on how far police have to travel. For a woman who had been sleeping in her car, already struggling to rebuild her life, this created yet another barrier between her and safety. But Mario Green wasn't just passively avoiding service. He knew exactly how the system worked. He had been through it before with Cootie and Me Clinty. He understood that as long as he wasn't officially served with those papers, he could claim ignorance. He could keep stalking, keep threatening, keep terrorizing, and legally, there was nothing anyone could do to stop him. So for 32 days, from July 21st to August 22nd, Latricia Green lived with the illusion of protection. She thought that piece of paper in the court file meant something. She thought the law was finally on her side. She thought she was safe. Meanwhile, Mario Green continued his campaign of terror, knowing that legally he was untouchable. The phone calls continued, the stalking continued, the psychological warfare continued, and every single day that protection order went unserved was another day closer to the tragedy that everyone should have seen coming. The system had given Latricia Green a protection order that existed only on paper. It gave her false hope while leaving her completely vulnerable to a predator who had learned exactly how to exploit every loophole, every delay, every bureaucratic failure in Michigan's broken system. On August 22nd, 2025, those failures would prove fatal. August 22nd, 2025 started like any other day for Latricia Green. She woke up in her small apartment, the one rented in her friend's name for safety. She got dressed for work, probably checking her phone for missed calls, probably looking out her window to make sure Mario wasn't waiting in the parking lot. For 5 months now, this had been her morning ritual, scanning for danger before stepping outside. She arrived at Henry Ford Hospital early, just like always. For over 20 years, she had walked through those doors as someone who made the place run. As a scheduler in the nursing department, she was the person who kept everything organized, who made sure patients got the care they needed when they needed it. Today would be no different, or so she thought. What Latricia didn't know was that 32 days after a judge had granted her protection, 32 days after she thought the law was finally on her side, her killer was planning his final move. Mario Green knew exactly what he was doing. He had studied her routine. He knew when she arrived. He knew where she worked. He knew that the basement of Henry Ford Hospital, the place where Latricia spent her days, was considered public space. No security badge required. No checkpoints. No barriers between him and his target. At 9:45 that morning, Mario Green walked through the front doors of Henry Ford Hospital. Security cameras captured him wearing all black with a gold chain necklace. 6 feet 4 inches tall, moving with purpose. He wasn't skulking or hiding. He walked like a man who belonged there. He made his way to the basement, to the scheduling department where Latricia worked. According to witnesses, he told people he was there to drop off some of her belongings. It sounded reasonable, even caring. An ex-husband returning his former wife's things. But Mario Green wasn't there to return anything. He was there to reclaim what he believed belonged to him. And if he couldn't have her, he was going to make sure no one could. Latricia saw him coming. She must have felt her blood turn to ice. The man she had been running from for 5 months. The man she had 2 protection orders against. The man who had turned her life into a nightmare. He was standing right in front of her, in her workplace, in the one place she thought she was safe. She told him to leave. Those would be among her last words. What happened next unfolded in the span of just 10 minutes, but no camera could capture the terror Latricia must have felt in those final moments. The argument began almost immediately, Mario's voice rising, Latricia's voice shaking. Her coworkers could hear the confrontation escalating. Between 9:45 and 9:55 a.m., Mario Green pulled out a handgun. The shots echoed through the basement of Henry Ford Hospital. Multiple shots fired from his handgun. Patients upstairs heard the sounds. Staff members froze. The place that was supposed to heal people had become a war zone. Latricia Green was struck by gunfire. The Wayne County medical examiner would later determine that she died from a close-range gunshot wound, the kind that happens when someone is standing right next to you, the kind that happens when there's nowhere to run. As Latricia lay dying on the floor of her workplace, Mario Green calmly walked out of the hospital. Security footage shows him leaving through the front doors at 9:55 a.m., just 10 minutes after he had entered. He got into his white 2011 Dodge Charger and drove away, leaving behind a crime scene that would haunt everyone who witnessed it. The hospital went into immediate lockdown. Code blue announcements echoed through the hallways. Staff members who had worked alongside Latricia for years were now trying to save her life. But it was too late. The woman who had helped coordinate care for thousands of patients could not be saved. Emergency responders rushed Latricia to the trauma center, but her injuries were too severe. At 40 years old, after surviving decades of abuse and 5 months of terror, Latricia Green's fight was over.
Shots ringing out, people praying, running, hiding for their lives, hoping no one else loses theirs.
I cannot believe this. Okay, I cannot believe this.
It was horrible. It was the most horrible feeling because when you're in a room and they tell you can't leave and it's somebody shooting, you just don't know. And your life just started flashing, in front of your eyes.
To say the employees here at Henry Ford Hospital just off West Grand Boulevard were shaken up after Friday's deadly shooting would be an understatement. Was your shift already over, or are you leaving early?
I'm leaving early. I need to get out of here. No, this scared me too bad. It just traumatized me too much. No.
She loved God. She focused on getting money and taking care of her family. Lord Jesus Christ, she was an amazing person.
Henry Ford Hospital was on lockdown for about an hour after the shots rang out before opening back up to patients and visitors. Streets were closed as the manhunt continued for the suspect throughout the afternoon, but staff inside the building say there was a lot of fear and confusion.
They were walking with their guns, like with their hands on it, looking for this person. And we didn't know if he was still hiding, so we didn't know anything.
The disbelief still there too, knowing a life was taken far too soon in such a violent way.
She never did nothing to nobody. She was a nice, generous person.
She was magnificent. She was more than a friend. She was a mother. She was a wife. She did her job.
Mario Green had finally gotten what he wanted. If he couldn't control her, he would destroy her. If she wouldn't come back to him, she wouldn't belong to anyone. The unserved protection order, the one that might have saved her life, sat useless in a court file 32 days after it was granted. A piece of paper that was supposed to protect her had instead become evidence of a system that failed her in every possible way. By 10 a.m., Henry Ford Hospital was swarming with police. By 2 p.m., they had found Mario's abandoned car at Trojan and Losser. But Mario Green himself had vanished, beginning a manhunt that would grip the city of Detroit for the next 17 hours. Latricia Green's worst fears had come true. She had begged for help before it went too far. She had warned that things would be too late. And on August 22nd, 2025, in the basement of the hospital where she had devoted her life to helping others, Latricia Green became another victim of a system that promised protection but delivered nothing but false hope. The manhunt for Mario Green began the moment he walked out of Henry Ford Hospital. Detroit Police Chief Todd Bettison mobilized every available resource. SWAT teams, federal agents, canine units. The entire city was on alert for a 6'4" man in black clothing driving a white Dodge Charger. But Mario Green had vanished. For 17 hours, he was a ghost. The man who had just committed murder in broad daylight had somehow disappeared into Detroit. Police checked his known addresses. They monitored his family members. They tracked his cell phone. Nothing. Friday afternoon, officers found his abandoned Dodge Charger on Trojan and Lassa roads. The white sedan that had carried him away from his crime was now evidence, dusted for fingerprints, and searched for clues about where he might have gone next. But the car told them nothing. They didn't already know Mario Green was dangerous. He was armed, and he was still out there.
And for me to look out the window, and my house is surrounded by officers with machine guns, and I'm looking at my cameras and they're in the back of my house. I got scared. Thought, what if I was sitting on the porch when he pulled up and got out the car? You know, he could have forced me in the house at gunpoint. I could have been pulling into my garage. He could have seen me coming in, could have came in. It's too many different ways that I could have been attacked. And just like by the grace of God, I was in the house in the bed.
The search intensified as darkness fell. Police helicopters circled overhead. Officers went door to door in neighborhoods where Mario might be hiding. The city held its breath. Then, just before 3 in the morning, on August 23rd, 17 hours after he had murdered his ex-wife, Mario Green was finally captured on LeMay Street. He was taken into custody without incident. The manhunt was over. Latricia's killer was in custody. But as investigators dug into Mario Green's background, they discovered something that made Latricia's death even more tragic. This wasn't his first time terrorizing a woman. This wasn't even his first time being arrested for domestic violence. Mario Green had a criminal history that read like a roadmap to murder. In 2001, he was convicted of aggravated stalking and sentenced to over 5 years probation. In 2006, he was convicted of arson and served approximately 6 years in prison. As recently as 2021, he had pleaded guilty to failure to pay child support, earning 3 years probation that ended just 2 months before he killed Latricia. Previous charges for domestic violence, previous restraining orders, previous women who had tried to escape him and failed. The system hadn't just failed Latricia Green, it had been failing women like her for years, allowing Mario to escalate his violence with minimal consequences. When Wayne County Prosecutor Kim Worthy announced the charges against Mario Green on August 25th, the list was devastating. First-degree premeditated murder, discharge of a firearm in a building causing death, aggravated stalking, possession of a firearm by a prohibited person, and 4 counts of felony firearm. If convicted, he would face life in prison without the possibility of parole. But the investigation also revealed that Mario Green hadn't acted alone. Anthony Lilamont Barnett, 54 years old, was charged with accessory after the fact and lying to a police officer for allegedly helping Green flee after the murder. Even in his final act of violence, Mario had found someone willing to help him escape justice.
Some breaking news right now. A late arraignment for not one, but 2 men linked to last Friday's deadly shooting at Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit. Mario Green on your left is charged with first-degree premeditated murder. He's accused of walking into the basement of the hospital and shooting his ex-wife, Latricia Green Brown, before driving away in his white Dodge Charger. The second man you see on your screen on the right is Anthony Barnett. He's accused of helping Mario Green get away from the scene. And he's charged with accessory after the fact and lying to a police officer.
For those who knew Latricia, no amount of prison time could bring her back. No conviction could undo the 5 months of terror she had endured. No sentence could restore the life that had been stolen from her in the basement of the hospital where she had devoted 20 years of her career to helping others. The investigation revealed what everyone already knew, but no one wanted to admit. Latricia Green had done everything right. She had left her abuser. She had sought help from the courts. She had tried to protect herself through legal channels. She had even hidden her address, renting an apartment in her friend's name to stay safe. But none of it mattered when the system designed to protect her failed at every critical moment. The protection order that might have saved her life was never served. The warnings Latricia gave about the danger she faced were dismissed until it was too late. In the end, the manhunt lasted 17 hours, but Latricia's nightmare had lasted 5 months. And for her family, friends, and coworkers, the pain would last a lifetime.
I broke down in tears because me and her used to talk, because I was telling her I was having problems with my child father, and didn't know she was having problems of her own. She really a good person. She don't mess with nobody or nothing.
Mario Green sits in a Wayne County jail cell, awaiting trial for the premeditated murder of his ex-wife. His probable cause conference was held in early September, with the preliminary examination following shortly after. He faces first-degree murder charges that could result in life in prison without parole. But for those who knew Latricia, no sentence can restore what was stolen on August 22nd. The legal machinery will determine Mario's fate, but it cannot answer the haunting question that follows Latricia's death. How does a woman who does everything right still end up murdered by the man she tried so hard to escape? The answer lies in the cascade of institutional failures that turn Latricia's final months into a countdown to tragedy. Each system that touched her case had the power to save her life. Each one failed when it mattered most. The protection order system failed Latricia twice. First, when a judge determined her documented evidence of stalking and workplace harassment didn't meet Michigan's burden of proof. Then again, when the state's backwards law required her, the victim, to arrange service of the order that Wayne County Judge Carla Testani finally granted on July 21st. While she waited for protection that never came, Mario roamed free for 32 days because that piece of paper was never served. Henry Ford Hospital failed Latricia despite 20 years of loyal service. The institution knew Mario was banned. They had his photograph in security offices. Latricia had begged them to move her office because he knew where to find her. She had meetings with security about the threat she faced. Yet they left their basement, where patients receive critical services, as accessible as a shopping mall. No meaningful security measures protected their own employee from a known threat. The broader criminal justice system failed Latricia by treating Mario's escalating violence as isolated incidents rather than a pattern leading to murder. 2 decades of charges, convictions, and releases taught Mario that violence against women carried no real consequences. Each slap on the wrist emboldened him further. But perhaps the most devastating failure was cultural. Friends and co-workers watched Latricia transform from a coffiner woman into someone who slept in hospital parking lots and jumped at shadows. They witnessed her 20-year career become secondary to her survival. They saw a human being reduced to prey, yet the response was sympathy rather than systemic change. Latricia's death exposes the deadly fiction that leaving an abusive relationship guarantees safety. She had left Mario, divorced him, moved out, hidden her address, filed police reports, sought court protection. She followed every piece of advice given to domestic violence victims. She died anyway. Her murder reveals that individual heroism cannot overcome institutional indifference. No woman should have to be perfect to deserve protection. No victim should have to navigate broken systems while fearing for her life. No employee should have to choose between earning a living and staying alive. Meanwhile, Anthony Lalamont Barnett faces his own charges for allegedly helping Mario escape justice. Charged with accessory after the fact and lying to police, Barnett's case reminds us that domestic violence doesn't happen in isolation. It requires a network of enablers who choose to protect killers rather than victims. The changes needed to prevent another Latricia are not revolutionary. They are obvious. Automatic service of protection orders. Workplace security protocols for employees facing domestic violence. GPS monitoring for stalkers. Meaningful sentences for repeat offenders. These solutions exist. The question is whether we value women's lives enough to implement them. Latricia's story cannot end with Mario's conviction. It must end with transformation of laws that fail victims, of institutions that prioritize procedure over protection, of a culture that treats women's safety as optional. Real justice means ensuring that no other woman experiences Latricia's terror. It means building a system where leaving becomes the beginning of safety, not the start of a death sentence. It means honoring her memory by refusing to accept that her fate was inevitable. Mario Green believed he owned Latricia Green. The systems meant to protect her acted as if her life was expendable. Both were wrong. Latricia Green belonged to herself, and her life had immeasurable value. The question now is whether her death will catalyze change or simply add another name to the list of women we failed to save. That answer depends on whether we choose to remember Latricia as a victim or as a call to action. She deserved better. The next woman deserves better. And until the system reflects that truth, Latricia Green's blood remains on all our hands. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. If you haven't already, be sure to like this video, subscribe to Crime Case Confidential, and turn on notifications. We upload new true crime content weekly, covering cases you know and many you don't. Stick with us as we bring you more stories that deserve to be heard. See you in the next.